Old School Lane Casual Chats is brought to you by oldschoollane.blogspot.com and is associated with Channel Frederator, Manic Expression, The Comic Book Cast, and The Arun Mehta Show. Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of Casual Chats. I am Patricia and I am back with these very special guests. We have back the writer of Power Rangers Helios. We have Jim. Welcome back, Jim.
Always glad to be here, Patty.
We also have the lovely lady behind Disney Debate and the One Piece retrospective and the Zen streams. We have Zenith Will Rule. Welcome back, Zenith.
Hey everybody.
And last but certainly not least, we have the man who discusses about various tokusatsu series and the Dot Hat retrospective. We have Des Shinta. Welcome back, Des.
Hi. No longer doing toku stuff, but yeah, still doing the dot hack stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so it's been a whole year since we discussed about the anime Fully Cooley in honor of Fully Cooley Progressive and Fully Cooley Alternative airing on Toonami. This time around, they have actually been out, and Fully Cooley Progressive is going to be coming out on DVD next month. So I thought that now it's the perfect opportunity to discuss about it. It's been a whole year since they've been out, so we've gotten a chance to watch both of them, and we have a firm understanding and discussion about how we feel about both of these shows, not only by their own merits, but how they compare to the original. So I don't think that we really need to go too much into the history of it, since we did discuss about it last year, with the exception of Jim, because last time the cartoon hero was here, but he's unable to join us because he's away at a convention. So Jim, how did you first get introduced to Fully Cooley?
I first got introduced when it aired back on Toonami back in early 2000s, I believe, right? And honestly, I tried to get into it because the visual style looked interesting, but truthfully, it was one of those shows that could just never appeal to me.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, so I admit I'm the dissenting voice here, as I'm not the biggest Fully Cooley fan.
Yeah, and I think that will be really interesting, considering that maybe one of these series that we'll be talking about may actually draw you into at least part of the series, at least. So, yeah, let's talk about it.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. Okay, let's not talk about any massive spoilers. So, yeah, let's discuss about the first one, which is called Fully Cooley Progressive, and it did air around September 8th, 2018. So, this time around, it takes place many years after the original Fooly Cooly, and it focuses on a completely different character in a completely different setting. So we have this girl who wears her headphones a lot, and she is kind of very similar to Naota in the first series, where she talks about how everything is just the same and her life is just kind of meaningless, and she doesn't really know what she wants to do, and she's just like seeing all of her surroundings, and it's just pretty annoying to her, so she just kind of ignores it. And throughout she's been having like these weird dreams where it's very post-apocalyptic, and she doesn't know what to think of it. And then all of a sudden, just when things become really dull and boring and pretty standard, we have Haruko from the first series coming by as the teacher, and then a whole bunch of weird stuff happens like you do, just like in the first series. So, and then we get introduced to a bunch of new characters. So we have another character by the name of Julia, who is kind of similar to Haruko, except that she's a lot more restrained in her mission. She actually has a very similar mission, very similar to Haruko, in which she's trying to find Atomisk. And also trying to take down Magical Madoka, because, they're still doing the same mission of trying to iron out the wrinkles in people's minds. So that's basically the gist of Fooly Cooly Progressive. When I've read the reviews online, it was torn to shreds. Like, people hated this series compared to the first one. And I can understand why, because it's pretty much almost very similar to the first series. Hidomi is very similar to Naota in a sense in which he's kind of adolescent who's very distant from everybody, and Haruko comes along and pretty much changes his life, kind of similar in a way, but
like a bipolar Cat in the Hat.
Yeah, very much so, like a bipolar Cat in the Hat, except that she works for the police force in outer space. And also she's trying to find her lost love and trying to, get back together with him, even though he wants nothing to do with her. So, yeah, it's pretty much Cat in the Hat, except in outer space and, crazy like that. Anyway, so, yeah, I remember reading the reviews of it, and with the exception of maybe some parts, a lot of people didn't really have anything good to say about it. So I'm actually curious about what your thoughts of it are.
Well, I'm kind of in the majority with the others, as again, not the biggest Fooly Cooly fan, and seeing this didn't really do much more to endear it to me. It just seemed again to be reaching too hard for being weird for weirdness' sake.
I honestly felt it was very similar to the original, and I feel like it has the same problem as the original, where it doesn't explain enough to begin with. If you hadn't seen the original series, you would have no idea what the hell is going on, and there's certainly some connections to what's happening before, but it's like also beat for beat kind of the same. I do applaud them for getting the same atmosphere, the same musical identity and feel, but the moment that the main character walks down the stairs and the mother's just like say good morning, it's like it's almost beat for beat the first episode of the first anime.
Yeah. Retreading old ground.
Mm-hmm. Which is kind of what they were going for, as from my understanding, Gainax had no interest in a sequel. So they were kind of in the perspective of, what more did you want? And the way I took it was, you can't stay stagnant. And that's kind of the state that Hidomi is stuck in, since her, well, if you don't mind a few spoilers, her father left, or was taken, or died. One of the others is, again, it's not clear. And then you got Jinyu coming in, who is, okay, that's a bit spoilery in and of itself. I'm not going to touch that, but is kind of acting as the foil and counter of Haruko, as, well, end of post-series and beginning of this one, Haruko won. She got Atomisk, and then it left again.
I will admit, I did like Jinyu. I thought she was a good addition to the cast. She was just, pretty cool, suave, badass. And honestly, I thought she was the best part of Progressive. It's just a shame she didn't stay around for the whole series.
Yeah, it is a shame because it would have been really nice if she would have lasted a little bit longer. We would have gotten a bigger backstory into her. She could have been the anti-Haruko. But unfortunately, a lot of the times that she is there, she kind of acts like Haruko, much more restrained, and a lot of the time she's working in the cafe breaking dishes.
Yeah. I loved her intro, though, when she almost ran over Hidomi on her motorcycle, and then she apologized for not killing her.
Yes.
And then even when Hidomi's mother was chewing her out after she drove off, she has to compliment on how cool she was.
Yeah.
That I will give credit for in Progressive. It did have some genuinely funny moments, like the scene where Haruko is posing as their teacher, and she's actually showing Hidomi hardcore porn to try and get a reaction out of her, but she's still just not responding in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also another thing that, I do like the fact that we do have the Pillows back doing the soundtrack for Progressive, and they would also do the soundtrack again for Alternative, but here, I just feel like like you were saying before, the atmosphere just feels so samey to the original that I didn't really notice anything off. I mean, there's a lot of new characters there, and it clearly shows that it's taken place many years after the original because they use, modern technology like cell phones and such.
And the city actually is mob-based, so they are back to where they started.
Right. And if you're expecting, any characters from the original to pop up in Progressive, with the exception of one, and I'm not going to spoil it, you're going to be sadly disappointed to know that pretty much nobody from the original comes back. Not even Naota comes back.
Well, his story was over. I don't see why he would have come back.
I know, but there's probably some people out there that would have liked to have seen maybe a quick cameo or something.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And then we have the other characters, like the side characters. I'm not really remembering too much about them, other than Mori wears a skirt and Marco is, I think is Latin descent, but I don't really remember about them character-wise.
They didn't really do anything. Hell, I thought they were just there for humor at the end, because apparently, from what I've seen of Japanese media, fat equals funny and crossdresser equals funny. So clearly this is the gag character.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work.
Yeah, the guy who has to pay a woman to pretend that she's romantically interested in him. Let's make fun. He's the loser. He's free to be laughed at.
Yeah, that really sucks, by the way. Because I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that could relate to, these kind of characters. I mean, especially with Marco, who is clearly a foreign student, but he doesn't really do anything other than being a test person for all of these attractions at an amusement park. Anyway, and then we have another character that I actually thought would have been really interesting. We have, I was going to say Eye Patch. So Eye Patch is kind of very similar to the Eyebrows guy in the first series, in which he's part of the investigation, trying to find out some more information regarding about, what's going on with the plant and all that stuff. And, with Magical Madoka, and, there's this house plant that is part of the plot that gets really complicated after a while. You're probably thinking about what's the big deal about it, but it gets revealed in a really, really kind of weird way, but that's to expect for Fooly Cooly. It's really weird.
It kind of inverts the energy field that Medical Mechanica is generating, both from the NO fields that teleport the monsters through people's heads and whatever's constructing and maintaining the irons.
Mm-hmm.
I also have to give them credit for establishing these characters early and making you think they're innocuous or just more side characters, and then showing that they actually have a greater role in the plot later on.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Mr. Dodo guy, and there's another character who's with Eye Patch that is trying to do a very similar thing. And there's another character who's one of the classmates, Ide, and I'm actually surprised that they didn't focus a lot more on him, because he actually has a sadder backstory than Hidomi, in which he kind of is like this cool character where he's like idolized by Goro and Marco, but then when you find out what he does, he actually is working at some sort of like he's not like he's working outside in like a junkyard where he's like treated as slave labor, and then he tries to invent a whole bunch of things, but he gets, you know, pushed around and beaten. And I was like, man, it almost kind of wishes that he was the main character, because he actually is going through something. And it's like, you compare that to Hidomi, in which, you know, she's perfectly, you know, somewhat content with, you know, a happy mom working in a cafe. And even though that, you know, her father is not around, and you know, her story doesn't really become like poignant until at least the last episode. And Hidomi is not really much of an interesting character to begin with.
Yeah, I kind of got what they were going with for her, in that she wishes she was more like Ida in trying to move forward, but, well, she's stuck due to her own emotional state that's just stagnant and stoic, and, well, as the series tries to describe it, as tsundere. And she's not really tsundere as emotionally shut off. Distance, another good way of describing it. And then, so the entire attraction between them is Ida is more like how she wants to be, and I think Ida's attraction as well is seeing something in her that he's gone through himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing I think that's interesting too is that in the first one it was more about a young adolescent coming to terms with a world that he doesn't understand, where this is more centered on older characters dealing with the melancholy of being a teenager and a different type of world. And that in and of itself is different, but unfortunately it follows a lot of the same beats as the original.
Yeah. Honestly, I just got the impression this was like a tale of trying to help a jaded young woman, you know, break out of her melancholy and see the world for what it is. But as I watched it, I just kept thinking, you know, Infinity Train did this so much better.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
That's just my interpretation.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that I want to, you know, I want to, you know, feel sorry for Hidomi because of everything that she's going through with her mundane life in school. And the headphones at first was kind of like a representation of covering, you know, the outside world, kind of like blocking the, you know, all the noise that's, you know, coming out of it, and then just trying to shut herself in. But then later on, it becomes kind of like a MacGuffin for, you know, her transformation and her overflowing, as they call it, when she's going through a lot of the emotions. And that's how, you know, Haruko comes into play, you know, using her very similar to Naoto, that, you know, can be able to lure in a Thomisk. And then, you know, and then it just becomes a lot more complicated with Julia around. And I think that, you know, I really thought that this would have been really interesting, you know, unlike Naota, who is like 12 years old and he's becoming a teenager, and he's surrounded by a bunch of weirdos like his, you know, perverted dad and grandpa, and all the people in school that are kind of weird, and hanging out with a high school student who smokes cigarettes and has no friends, and you know, the mayor's daughter, and, you know, they're all really strange in their own way. And it does tell a really interesting coming of age story. But here, this would have been a great opportunity, because in Progressive, Hidomi is 14 years old. She's already a teenager going through all of this, and it would have been nice to see kind of, you know, her perspective about like being a shut-in. Like, why is she a shut-in other than her, you know, her dad's not around, and that she is kind of distant from her schoolmates and her mom and all that stuff. There's not really a clear understanding, especially, you know, with the dreams that she is constantly having, which I do like the art style that they go for. I mean, unlike in the first series, there's not a lot of art variety in Progressive. There's like maybe something akin to that with the dream sequences and with episode 5, in which it's kind of looking like a manga drawing. But other than that, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I mean, there's no point turns into a South Park episode. So it's like, the original has that over that a lot.
Very true. I don't think there's really much to say about Progressive other than, for a lot of people, it was a massive disappointment. They wanted something, akin to Fooly Cooley, but they got it in a way that feels beat for beat like the original and wasn't able to break out of the original. Unfortunately, something like Progressive, you cannot watch it on its own. It needs to be watched alongside with the original to have a full understanding.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like what I've been hearing about Konosuba, the second season. Like, people wanted a second season, but when it came out, they weren't really happy with it because it was pretty much the same as the first season.
It was like Konosuba Season 2 is just the third and fourth volumes adapted into 10 episodes. That's not really, like, unless you're following the story arc, you kind of, like, it's not the same type of insanity you were going to expect.
Mm-hmm. So it's just, it's like, I guess a better description would be people wanted a second season of No Game, No Life. Instead, they got a prequel series. Like, you expect something continuation of what's happening instead of something completely different but beat for beat the same.
Yeah, I can see that.
Something else I noticed here is that the anime references to other material aren't as clearly defined. Like Hidomi's mecha form, I swear I was pulling up a half dozen things it reminds me of, like Gao Gaigar's Zonder metalification monsters and stuff like that, and it's like it's less distinct on what they're calling from and homaging, unlike the original series where, hey, if you looked around, you can probably find something, case in point, the South Park reference.
Or the Akira reference.
Or the Akira reference. And it wasn't as clear this time around. So it felt like it had contradictory more identity as it wasn't obviously trying to homage something, but conversely less, as you didn't see as much of a mashup to create the insanity of the story.
Yeah, and also, unlike the first series, it felt like they were trying to continue with a flowing narrative. Like, in order for you to understand about, as mentioned before, the plant, that you saw in an earlier episode, watch the later episode and you'll understand what it's about. The reference of, with Julia and Haruko having like these bickerings together will play clearly in another episode. Goro, Mori meeting up with hiring a girl to be his girlfriend does come back in a later episode. So it actually follows through. Unlike in the first series, the episodes are kind of like a mishmash of randomness until the last episode where it all starts clicking and making sense. That I think I understand why, some people kind of remember it. It's like, what's going to happen next? It kind of leaves you a mystery. It's like pulling out a goodie bag. It's like you get something different every single time. And they were trying to, not do that and trying to actually tell a cohesive story. But the problem is that they kept the same structure and formula of Fooly Cooley because it's Fooly Cooley. It still has 6 episodes. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. It still has the coming of age melodramatic moments, and it still has the same settings and all that stuff. So it felt like it was trying to do something different, but still had to keep to the same structure and same feel because it was trying to ride on the coattails of its predecessor.
I honestly feel like it might have worked if it was like a 12-episode series, give more time to play with the setting and the characters, but a lot of it just moves too fast or skips details that would get us invested in the setting.
Yeah, especially in the final episode. They just cram way too much in to try and bring around a resolution.
The problem, I think, is Fooly Cooley itself. Fooly Cooley was an experiment. It was a 6-episode series that was insane and weird, confusing, and somewhat supposed to be that way, and trying to recreate that same magic again in a coherent fashion does not work.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't help that Gainax has not been doing much as of late. It's either adaptations of other people's works or outsourcing stuff to Evangelion's rebuild movies or Studio Trigger, because Hideaki Anno went to his own production company. A lot of Gainax's great people jumped ship to Studio Trigger.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Everything, like, Trigger is, Kill a Kill and everything, that's Trigger now. The wacky, insane, but somewhat cohesive and deep stories and stuff that the Gynax touch is now in Studio Trigger.
Case in point, 4S Gridman last year, I fell in love with that series. And I was a big fan of both its original form and the Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad adaptation that ran in the 90s. Yeah, that was a Tokusatsu series originally, believe it or not.
Yeah, and I was just about to say the same thing, that a lot of the people who worked on Gynax when Fooly Cooly was out have all moved on to various studios, especially Studio Trigger. So a lot of the people who are working on Gynax now are not the same people who are working on Fooly Cooly, Progressive, and Alternative. So, and I believe that the original creator wasn't even involved in either of the series, as far as I know.
And another thing is that the times have changed. It has been a long time since the original Fooly Cooly. And thinking about the type of anime that came out at that time period versus the anime that come out today, we expect something different from anime. And I think we can still watch Fooly Cooly, the original, and still understand it was at a time where they were experimenting. But nowadays, when we watch something like Progressive, we expect a little bit more, and we expect something different.
Yeah, to which the studio heads say, what, you want something different? You sheep don't know what you want. We're going to give you the same old crap, and you're going to like it. Or am I just being cynical there?
It's cynical, but not completely wrong.
Yeah.
What can I say? I have little faith in the entertainment industry nowadays.
Yeah, so overall, for if you've ever read a lot of the critiques online about what people felt about Progressive, a lot of them are not wrong. Fooly Cooly Progressive, I even read somewhere on Twitter or on a website or something, I forget where, but some people actually called it Fooly Cooly Regressive, in which, yeah, I know, it's clever, haha. But yeah, they call it that because even it should have been a lot better. And you're definitely right, Zenith, that it did come out in a time in which it was very experimental. Like, they put out a lot of like weird anime around the early 2000s to kind of be a parody of anime. Jungle wa Ichimo Hare no Chegu, Abinobashi Magical Shopping Arcade, Bobobo. Yes.
That was something else before it was adapted into anime. I'm forgetting what.
I think it was a manga, but even still, Bobo was a parody of everything.
Yes, it was. So yeah, it was akin to what was going on at the time, and anime now is very different than anime from 15 years ago. Like, anime from 15 years ago was very experimental and wild and crazy and all that stuff, but nowadays, a lot of anime is a lot more complex with detailed stories and, complex characters with philosophical thoughts, and, or it could be, like, really over-the-top shonen. So, it's either one or the other. Something like Fooly Cooly, you don't really see a lot of nowadays.
I'm sure there's still a niche market for it. You just have to know how to craft it properly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that because it came out around the early 2000s, that went with anime becoming like very new for American audiences with the popularity of like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff. Something like Fooly Cooly that was like incredibly weird and strange was like it was a novelty. It was something that people had never seen before, which is why it became a huge cult hit that it did. Now that anime is a lot more common in either on television or on various websites, I think that the appeal of it is not as strong.
I feel like Fooly Cooly worked because it was something different in an environment that needed something completely different. I mean, we had our standard at the time was Naruto, Full Metal Alchemist, Bleach, and maybe
One Piece.
Like, maybe, like, we had these standard animes that were airing on TV, and then Fooly Cooly came and completely, like, was something completely different. Nowadays, we have so many flavors of anime that something like Fooly Cooly, we don't bet an eyelash at. I mean, there's a lot more like it, but it's the same thing as saying, like, Paranoia Agent. That at the time was something completely different than anything anyone had seen. Nowadays, we've probably seen something like it. So it's less an impact and more of what can you do with it to make it different.
Yeah, very true. All right, so I think that's pretty much all we need to say about Progressive. So let's talk about the third and, well, final season. That is if, they announce something else. I don't know, but we'll just have to wait and see.
If they do announce something else, I'm guessing by the naming conventions, the next series will be either called Fooly Cooley Synth Pop or Fooly Cooley Dubstep.
Dubstep would be fun.
Neither of those relate much to rock, though. Like, Fooly Cooley was rock-based, then progressive rock, then alternative rock.
Punk? Fully Cooley Punk.
Okay,
metal. Fooly Cooley metal.
Fully Cooley Punk.
That's it. Fooly Cooley metal. That worked better.
All right.
Maybe.
I think punk would be. I think punk would be awesome though. Okay.
Grunge.
Yeah. Everyone wearing acid wash jeans and having strangly hair.
That would be actually really interesting to see. I mean, I don't know if they really would, rock that style in Japan, but anything goes. All right, so let's go over to Fooly Cooley Alternative. So this once again takes place like many years after the original, and we have a bit of a different flavor in this one, something that has never been seen in Fooly Cooley. It plays more like a slice of life kind of anime, with a mixture of the wackiness that you would see in a typical setting of Fooly Cooley. So it focuses on 4 girls. It focuses on Kana, Pets, Hijiri, and Mosan, and they're just 4 girls who are going through their everyday life in high school. They were building like a rocket. The girls have their own problems and issues, and the main focus of Kana is that she likes everything to be the same. She wants everything to be standard, and she wants everything to follow in the same beat because she feels comfortable in it. And she's 17 years old, which at that point in her time, especially with the other girls, they're about to graduate from high school. So they're trying to live off the last bit of their youth. And then Haruko comes along, and she's a mixed mash of a whole bunch of jobs. She works at a food truck, she's a nurse, she's a basketball coach, she's a whole bunch of weird things. But she's a lot more restrained than she's ever been in this series, but she still acts really crazy.
Yeah, crazy, but I think the restraint helps because Haruko, she's actually, I found her the most likable in this incarnation because she's not being overly selfish or overly psychotic. She's genuinely helping Kana and her friends, and it seems to be out of the goodness of her heart, and it definitely made the character appeal a lot more to me.
Well, I think there's explanation for that, and it comes from Jason DeMarco, the co-creator of Toonami and the current vice president creative director of Adult Swim. Alternative is a prequel series occurring in an alternative timeline. The ending of Alternative loops things back around to avoid the bad ending of Medical Makina winning. And this is where Haruka is first exposed to the power of Atomisk as she's still working for the space police. We've discussed that before, that a lot of that is invoked as a reference to the Sentai series Deca Ranger. And, well, she's still, sane at this point before her obsession with Atomisk made her go a bit mad.
I did not know that. Thank you for clarifying.
I guess it does make a lot of sense that it does take place in an alternative universe, hence the term alternative for its title. But a prequel series, I mean, I guess if it is a prequel series, it does make a lot of sense that, Medical Mechanica is not as incredibly powerful as they would be later on, especially with them being everywhere. I mean, we didn't even see the iron-shaped building until, much later on in the series. I thought it was actually kind of clever that it was actually disguised buildings, and then first and foremost, the series kind of starts off with a whole bunch of giant pins being put all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Then Haruka doesn't even have her first guitar until, she pulls it out of Kana's NO gate, and she doesn't seem to have the crazy power she did in either the original or Progressive.
Yeah. I guess it does make a lot of sense. And there is no sense of, Magical Mechanica in which they are, trying to play a massive role in the story until, much later on. It just mostly focuses on these girls and going through their struggles in life. And we have Haruko along, playing all these, weird parts and I think probably one of the funniest scenes in Alternative is the rap scene. I have a really strong feeling that Corey Walgren must have had a ball just, out of nowhere, just rapping. I thought it was hilarious.
It reminded me a little bit of Zombieland Saga, that the rap that happened in that episode, and it just like I feel like a lot of the dubs have been having fun with like just acting crazy with different musical styles lately.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. So yeah, I think with it going in this direction, I thought it was actually really nice. It was definitely a refreshing way of presenting as opposed to Progressive, in which it was trying to follow beat for beat like the original.
It's almost like they wanted to remind people what Fooly Cooly was, so they created Progressive to kind of recreate the original for new audiences instead of re-airing the original. It's like they could have just re-aired the original on Toonami and then done Alternative.
Mm-hmm.
I'd agree with you there.
Yeah.
This might just be me, but I found it really hard to actually care about anything in Alternative. Like, I was actually more invested and interested in Progressive. It wasn't the best thing, but I felt like I was getting more out of it. Here, I never got invested or really had any attachment to these girls.
A little surprising. I mean, I can understand why it wouldn't be for everyone. I had the opposite route. I went into Alternative expecting to not like it, much like Progressive, and I found myself, just really getting invested in the characters and drawn into what was going on because of how different it was.
From the start, I just found Progressive a little bit too much. Like, it almost felt like it was trying too hard, whereas Alternative felt more like it was in line with what I wanted.
Alternative is not without its flaws. With the character of Mo-san, again, they rely on a few too many fat jokes to, for the sake of easy comedy. And I also found it a little irritating how in the first half of the series, they would often have the Prime Minister appearing in news broadcasts, making commentary on what the theme of that episode was supposed to be. Like in the episode where Mo-san dreams of becoming a fashion designer, that's you have the Prime Minister giving a speech where she's encouraging people to follow their dreams to their destiny. When Kana is dealing with, her unrequited feelings for a schoolmate, you have the Prime Minister talking about the importance of love. So that felt a little heavy-handed.
Yeah.
But those were like the only real flaws I had with it.
Yeah, it sounds like they took the criticism of, could you explain a bit more of what's going on, and instead just put in a bot to exposition dump for the audience.
Yeah.
I guess that does make a lot of sense.
Exposition news.
Yeah, it pretty much is. I think that you're absolutely right, that it definitely does feel like it was trying to cater to the people. It's like, this show doesn't make a lot of sense to, we're just going to tell you everything of what you're supposed to feel and what's going on in this situation. It's like you go from something as akin to like a coming-of-age story in which, Naoto going through his struggles is essentially a metaphor for him growing up and him being surrounded by a bunch of people that is very strange and living through the monotony of life to, we're going to have a bunch of girls who are going through their last year of high school, and we have a character who wants everything to stay exactly the same, and the morals and the messages are going to be explained via news report from some reporter who's constantly discussing about what's going on with like everything. The mysterious pins, are they from aliens? To, it's really hot. Is it due to those irons that are surrounding the entire planet? So, yeah, it does become a lot heavy-handed. But yeah, I think that maybe for some people, they didn't really connect with the characters because maybe, as mentioned before with Fooly Cooly, maybe that's not what we expected to see from it. I mean, Zenith and I, we talked about this in the Azumanga Daioh podcast, that it's been a very, very long while since we've had a slice of life anime that really left a huge impact on a lot of people, since they don't really do it as much anymore. And maybe for Fooly Cooly, that's not what we expected to see.
I feel like with Fooly Cooly, the shock and weirdness only works once. When you do it a second time and you do different things with it, yeah, it's going to be interesting, but it's not going to have the same impact. And honestly, if you have to, you have to have something that stands out about it. You have to have these characters, and it's nice that we have Haruko back, but we need something to latch onto that says, yes, this is Fooly Cooley. This is dat weirdness, you know.
Yeah, and I do like the fact that the other girls are going through some issues. I mean, as mentioned before, we have Mosan, who wants to be a fashion designer, but she comes from a very low-class background, and she works in a part-time job where she's dealing with working, a physical labor job, and she gets really tired, and, she practically is winded after a while. And then we have Hijiri, who, she feels like she's the most mature one, that she's older than anyone else, that she can be able to date a college boy and, everything's fine with it, even though a bunch of other guys want to be with her. And then we have Kana, who wants everything to stay the same. She's the complete opposite of what we've seen from Naota and Hidomi, in which life is boring and life is the same thing and they just accept it. She embraces it. She wants things to stay the same because she's happy. And Pets is a very interesting case. We barely get to know anything about Pets until maybe episode 4 or 5 of the series, and it gets into a bit of a plot twist that I'm not going to spoil for those who haven't seen it yet. And it actually is very shocking, especially when it comes to the full reveal of who Kana is as a character.
I found it a little heartbreaking, to be honest, so I'm just warning people in advance, when you get to episode 5, be prepared to have your heart stomped on.
Yeah.
It's a better contrast between the previous two in that Naoto and Hidomi want to grow up, want to leave stagnation, whereas Kana's that person that just refuses to do so and wants to stay an irresponsible and inconsiderate little kid. And I get what Pets was going for with what she said in episode 5, but it's my problem with how she dealt with it is there is no point at which she could not have told the others about this. Hell, it's my criticism of all of them. If they've been friends for years, why have they not talked about any of their issues? Why have they not told their friends about what they really want to do until, they're forcibly exposed?
Maybe they just felt embarrassed by it, and maybe they just wanted to keep it to themselves. I mean, for a lot of
teenagers are secretive.
Yeah, very secretive. Yeah. I mean,
not to this kind of degree, in my experience, at least.
Sure, everybody's different. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are embarrassed about that. Hey, I come from a poor family, while on the opposite side, a person comes from a rich family. And then you have a character who, feels that, they have everything they want, but then they feel kind of unsatisfied. So, yeah, I mean, everybody's different and everybody expresses themselves in different ways. But I feel, once again, because it's chained into the Fooly Cooley lineage, it has very few episodes to work around all of these issues. It should have had at least 12 episodes. That way we could have gotten to know these characters more.
They have to work within the constraints, but I'd say they did a pretty decent job overall.
Yeah. And there aren't as many references or crazy animation styles compared to the original, or even to Progressive either. The only reference that I can think of was the Transformers reference, in which one of the cars turns into Bumblebee, and Haruko grabs the giant meat kebab and she yells out Michael Bay. So that's the only one I can think of.
And of course the alternative episode 1 ones with Commodore 4s and Deca Ranger, as I've mentioned before.
Oh yeah, that's right, the Deca Rangers reference, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if this counts as a reference, but the one episode is titled Shake It Off, and I don't know if that was intentional, but I can't forgive them for getting that stupid Taylor Swift song stuck in my head.
Yeah, I mean, since it does kind of reference music a lot, I wouldn't be surprised if they threw that in there as well. Yeah, so I do say that this is a vast improvement to Progressive, in which it doesn't feel the same as the original. But I'm not sure about how people are going to feel about it compared to the original. I do say that it's definitely worth checking out if you are, if your expectations are that this takes place in somewhat of an alternative universe, and it takes place before the original, and it tells a a story that is a bit heavy-handed, and maybe some of the characters are going through some issues that maybe you can relate to or not. And but yeah, I would say that I would recommend for people to check this one out.
Definitely. I mean, if I'm someone who could get into it, and I was established as not having liked Fooly Cooly that much before, then yeah, this is definitely worth checking out.
Yeah.
As someone who likes the original Fooly Cooly, I feel like you probably won't like Progressive. Alternative was better, but I just... When I heard they announced there was more Fooly Cooly, I was a little bit surprised, and I didn't feel it was necessary, and I still don't really feel it's fully necessary, because they could have created an entirely new anime and not have the Fooly Cooly constraints, and that would have actually helped this a lot more.
Yeah.
I, of course, have said I'm in the minority camp and enjoyed Progressive more than Alternative, but I think that's because I was more following the Haruka story arc then, and I've seen a bunch of what Hidomi and Ida have done in other anime that I wasn't too as annoyed with it as other people. Something else I'd actually like to see happen with this is maybe the story of Progressive could be done better in the future if, like, they were rolled into the Super Robot Wars games. For those who don't know, Super Robot Wars is Bandai's mass crossover of a bunch of different mecha and mecha-related anime, and Haruka hitting robots with a Rickenbacker actually counts for this. A lot of Gainax anime, even if they only tangentially have something mechanical, have ended up featured in these games, and a lot of them have managed to fix the flaws in other series stories. Case in point, Gundam Seed Destiny actually works a lot better in the Super Robot Wars franchise than Destiny itself did. A lot of the bad Gundam series, Victory and G-Reco, for example, both have gotten better consideration through them. So if Progressive was to be readapted as part of that series, I'd actually like to see that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be really nice. So yeah, I think that there's not really much to say. I think that we're pretty much done here. So, overall, choose. I would recommend that you watch both of them and come up with your own conclusion, whether you prefer Progressive or Alternative. But if you have not seen the original, then I would implore you to check out the original and come up with your own conclusion to that. And if you want to see more, then check out both series. But just understand that it's going to be either feeling really samey or very different from the original. So depending on what you care for, that's up to you. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for our discussion. So once again, guys, I want to thank you so much for coming on by.
No problem.
You're very welcome.
It was fun.
All right, so time for plug and self-promotion. So, Jim, what do you got?
Well, I am working on the next chapter of Power Rangers Helios. This is going to be the first in a 3-part arc introducing the 6th Ranger, and I'm hoping to have that up in the next few days.
All right. Des Shinta, what do you got?
For those who haven't seen it the first time around, I'm still continuing my remastery project of the IMOC quadrilogy in Dot Hack Retrospective. I am also finally working on getting a review of Mega Man Battle Network 3 finished, because I have been working on that on and off since 2017 before I wrap up to work on stuff for next year.
All right. And Zenith, what do you got?
I have a lot going on right now. You can find me on youtube.com/Zenith Will Review. I'm working on... We had a lot of crossovers that we filmed at Con Bravo, and I'm working on a lot of stuff. Next week is a crossover with Rowdy that I'm posting. Then I'm doing stuff for the DM and Hagen. And in the meantime, DuckTales decided to drop a DuckTales bomb, so Kat and Doug are helping me with diving into DuckTales while we do the Disney debate. There's a lot going on.
All right. And let's see, as for me, I am been working on a lot of stuff. I know that it hasn't been out yet, but just wanting to let you know I have been working on some things. First thing I've been working on is the premiere of Heroic Jimmer Junk, which I'll be discussing about Cyber 6. I actually found some more information that I wanted to add into the script, which is why it's taking a bit longer. Then there's Good Burger, which I am going to do for all that month. I just finished reading Good Burger 2, the book, and
The book?
The book.
There's a book.
Yeah, there is a book.
Wait, there's a sequel to Good Burger?
Yes, there is a sequel to Good Burger in a book form that came out around. Yes, and I read it, and it is weird. I'll be talking about.
I mean, I liked the movie, but a sequel.
Yes, I'll be talking more about that in my video, which is why it took me a long time. I mean, I wasn't going to do just a simple review because I'm crazy, but yes, I am going to be talking about the making of the movie, my thoughts on it, and the book, because a lot of people want to see a Good Burger too, but seem to have forgotten that there was a book of it roughly around the same time that the first movie came out. So I'll be discussing about all that because yay. And I actually interviewed someone as the last piece for all that month. I might as well reveal who it is. I interviewed Lori Beth Denberg, one of the first cast members of all that. I actually got her on the show, and we had a great time talking about her working on the show, and both the original and coming back for a few episodes of the remake that came out just a few months ago, and a whole bunch of other things. So that will be coming out really soon. And Aaron and I, we had just finished Dream Machine, which we looked at every single DreamWorks movie, and we'll be discussing about what our new podcast is going to be. That's going to be coming out really soon. And next month I do have a surprise, and it's been something long overdue. So that's going to be it for my promotions. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Let us know in the comments below about what are your thoughts on Fully Coolly Progressive and Alternative. Did you like them? Did you not like them? What are your thoughts on either characters that have been portrayed in each series? Do you think that they were not necessary? Just let us know down below. Thank you so much. Hope to see you around soon, and take care.
Have one, guys.
Later.
Bye.